Business Minds, presented by the Florida Business Journals, and brought to you by Tico Peoples Gas, at the heart of Florida's energy. In this episode, South Florida Business Journal Editor-in-Chief Mel Melendez welcomes OneWorld Properties CEO Peggy Olin, who shares why South Florida's real estate market remains red hot in spite of rising interest rates.
Welcome, Peggy. Thanks for joining us today. Now, you've had great success with your brokerage firm, OneWorld Properties, which has a solid track record of selling high-end condominiums in both the Miami and Fort Lauderdale markets. I know you focus mostly on the sale of newly built condos, and many of the region's top developers use your firm to secure buyers, especially international buyers. So can you talk a little bit about the strategies that you employ to sell to foreign buyers?
Sure. Good morning, Mel. Thank you for having me. This is fantastic. I love that you guys are doing podcasts now, and I'm excited to be one of your guests. So thank you for that. You know, it's interesting. South Florida in general, when it came to condo development and sales and marketing, was always predominantly international buyers, especially for the Miami region. And if we're talking the northern part of the Tri-County area, or like in the Broward County area, there's always Canadian buyers looking into. So I've been in real estate for 20 some years. I started the firm in 2008, and I loved the challenge and I love the international aspect of real estate. So we always focused on creating strong partnerships abroad. So one of the biggest strategies that we do is really we keep good relationships with international brokerages that wouldn't be coming to South Florida all the time, but they find a way with us to trust us and send their clients to our development. So we're constantly promoting this. So we become very much like as a promoter of the project or projects that we may be representing in the countries that we feel that they're going to be the most appropriate for the location. And we really focus on that. We focus on creating strong bond partnerships that by the time we start a whisper campaign of a development and we start all of that, they're already first in line and they're expecting it. The interesting thing about that, even though if we look at my trajectory in the last, let's say 10 years, where typically would have been 85% international buyers are buyers, today that has changed, right? It's become a little bit more of a U.S. market as well. So the same tactics and techniques and relationship building strategies that we've used abroad, we're also using in brokerages and agents that are focused on selling their clients a second home in other states. So it's become a very interesting dynamic for us.
And from what I understand, you've sold properties to buyers from nearly 60 foreign markets. Now, what are some of the challenges that comes with that? And I can only assume that not all buyers are created equal, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, there's definitely challenges. And I think the interesting part about dealing with buyers from, again, let's say 60 different markets is that it goes in cycles. Right? I think the first thing is that you'll notice is that, at 1 year, it could be, let's say, if we go back 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, it was Venezuela was number one. So you had Venezuela. And when we had, at the time, Russia, and then we had, buyers from Argentina and Brazil. And then because the economy in those countries shift, then all of a sudden you have different markets. So it's constantly having the pulse of the international market, constantly having to be looking into the trends and the upcoming trends and what we could be looking out for in order to prepare ourselves to educate that market and what we have. I think the continuous strategy also is education on those markets to be successful. Now, some of the challenges that come with that sometimes is people take time to take their money out. So sometimes in developers, especially with developments, the market that condos are selling much faster. So the developers expect for the buyer to be able to send in their deposit right away, right? They expect their 10% right away. And if they're buying $1 million condo, that's $100,000. But for example, if you're thinking about China, they have a currency restriction up to $50,000 that they can send out at once. So all of a sudden we have to ask for time. So I think the number one benefit to provide to our buyers is really structure and say, and be upfront with a developer that's expecting to have, let's say, 50% of their sales coming from international. saying, hey, there's going to be a piece of this that we're going to have flexibility. Flexibility is a strategy, I guess, with a developer in order for us to give that to our buyers. In addition to that, when it comes to language, we have typically in my staff, I think in our team, we speak over 10 languages, right, combined. So there's always someone that can assist them. And when it comes to exchange rates and inflation in other countries, again, that also plays in our favor or against us. And that's where the countries come in and out of rank, right, as to when we're selling who at what point in time. Great.
Now, you mentioned China. I wanted to talk about the China market specifically because I know you opened an office in Shanghai and are really well versed on that market. Talk to us about why China, and is that market still booming for Florida developers?
Sure. So China's right now, China's probably living some of the worst crises they've ever lived through with a zero tolerance COVID policy, right? We opened our office in China 6 years ago. We have a location in Shanghai. We have a satellite in Beijing and one in Shenzhen. And the reason why we started in China is because at the time when we opened the office, we were participating on raising capital from an EB-5 investment angle. And what that means is the immigration component of international investment, where they invest $500,000 and they have the opportunity to apply for a visa, an EB-5 status, where eventually leads to residency. And the Chinese were really interested in that in order not so much for the parents, but really mostly for their children and for their future. So when I started going there for that purpose, I realized that there was a big appetite for international markets and property, especially in the U.S. So what we did is we really established an extension of our sales environment and our sales office. So we have scale models and we have offices, and we're really educating the market and really the broker community to be able to sell to their clients in China. And because we have the benefit of having all of our projects that we represent exclusively, we were able to pay the broker as if they were an outside broker, their full commission, right? Typically what happens in foreign countries, and again, not only in China, but in all the other countries that we deal with, when someone takes a development to that country, they have to share within the commission. With us, you have the benefit that we would pay them directly their full commission. So we had a lot of traction. We were selling a lot of South Florida in China, and it was a price point opportunity. And again, because of the currency restriction in China of the $50,000 per year that you're only allowed to transfer, one of the benefits with establishing a payment plan, let's say, or a more lenient deposit structure, they were able to benefit. So we did sell a lot of Chinese in South Florida. Right now, obviously, the situation in China has slowed down significantly. And also the second reason is because the investment from the EB-5 perspective has also decreased due to the EB-5 program changing, and also the amount of time that China has to wait in order to get the approvals through. Sometimes it could be 10 years. So that alone has really slowed down that market. But because we do international, we actually, out of that office, we sell other parts of the world, and also we sell New York. So it's been a really interesting, but it's very sad to see the challenge, right? And what's happening in that market right now. It's my team is everybody working from home, and they can't even leave their buildings. So it's very challenging. Sad.
Right. So you just explained how cyclical it can be when working with foreign markets. So what are the foreign markets are really hot right now when it comes to selling South Florida properties? And what do you envision as the next hot market?
Well, let me give you a very fresh example. We launched a project in downtown Miami with Related called The Crosby. And we launched that project January 7th to reservations. By the beginning of April, these are 450 residential units. Right. By the beginning of April, we were completely reserved. We started sending contracts out last week, and I'm already 50% converted as of right now.
Wow.
The number one buyer for this project, I believe, is Colombia. And that is because obviously there's a fear that Colombia right now is going to go in the communist side, and there's buyers pulling a lot of money. But it goes Colombia, Mexico, and then the third demographic is a U.S. buyer, which is interesting because we are seeing now that because Miami and South Florida, it is such a, everybody's talking about it. People want a little piece of it and not necessarily want to spend a lot of money, but really looking for that perfect pied-à-terre. So it really works well. So yeah, Colombia and Mexico, I would say right now are our top buyers.
You touched a little bit on the challenges of COVID. And we chatted during a Business Journal panel not too long ago, where you shared how much selling real estate has changed since the COVID-19 pandemic. Can you speak a little bit on some of the ways that the pandemic has transformed or changed the buyer-seller experience?
Sure. I think that it has in both the development sales area and the general residential sales experience. I feel that everyone is a lot more open to a virtual conversation and a virtual showing, per se. If you would have told me 5 years ago that I had to, and anyone from our team had to sell to an Argentinian family a condo over Zoom, I would have been like, never, because the Latin American community is very much you have to have the personal touch. They have to come, they have to see you, they have to feel you, have to connect. And boy, was I wrong. I remember, and I mentioned this to you, I think during that time, or in that conversation we had, that we sold entire buildings. Exactly when we were during lockdown, we were converting Legacy in downtown Miami, which, we were selling just an expensive, $950 average per square foot building, beautiful in downtown Miami. And all of our contracts, we were fully reserved, but we had to send our contracts in the middle of COVID to South America, where we had to show everything virtually. And we were back to back. Our team was back to back from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. at night in presentations. And I think it really opened up the mind to people being more receptive to virtual sales, right? And I think the same way on the general residential side, people from my team also that are doing a little bit of that, and friends that are in the industry, we talked so much about how 80% of the sale is done not from the visit. It's really from, the links you send, the videos you take, the pictures, how much information you put out there for people to be informed and really walk through, let's say, a home or a project. And then by the time you meet with them, if you ever meet with them, they're already almost, they're 80% sold, right? They have just final questions. So it's more about the buying process. What happens next? How do I sign? What is the deposit? But the actual sales component, it really goes through as easy as a Zoom presentation. So the biggest thing is now the investment that you made in order to accomplish that and have those right tools for everything, whether it's a home you're selling or a building.
You launched your company, OneWorld Properties, in 2008, and that was smack in the middle of the Great Recession. And the company has been very successful. Do you think that going through that experience helped prepare you to better navigate the challenges brought by the pandemic?
I think, well, first of all, 2008 was like, what comes down must go up at some point. That was my logic, right? When I started the company. But yes, because one of the things is, I remember back in 2008, I used to work for a reputable developer here in South Florida called WCI Communities. And then when they went bankrupt, I remember I went from selling, $1 million condos to all of a sudden getting REOs and tape from banks. And I had to walk into, with my team, and we were getting listings for like $30,000, $50,000, but it wasn't the price at the time. It was the volume, and it was how much work you had to put into it. And at that time, I remember we had to do a lot of not only follow-up, but we had to do a lot of strategy in order to how we were going to sell this. And I think the strategy component of those times certainly helps with when you have a challenge. And so, when you started a challenge and then you have a little bit of a ride and then you face with another challenge, it definitely makes you stronger. It also, I think it helps you with how to teach your team, which probably had never really been through one of those times, because we have a lot of younger people on our team who've never lived through, what happened between 2002 and 2008, and then, getting to 2008, and the different and the challenge. So it definitely helps you as a leader also, I feel, being able to navigate with your team.
OneWorld Properties CEO Peggy Olin joining us. In our next segment, she tackles the topic of affordable housing as Florida Business Minds continues. People's Gas, invested in lowering emissions and developing sustainable energy for a greener Florida. People's Gas is committed to Florida's clean energy future. Learn more about renewable natural gas at floridasenergy.com.
By all accounts, South Florida has weathered the challenges of the pandemic better than many other metro areas across the nation. And as you know, COVID actually accelerated the trend of people and companies that are relocating here, which was a real boon to our real estate market. But that's led to housing becoming very scarce and expensive for locals. So what do you think needs to happen to build more housing that's affordable for residents, including for middle-class families, which are increasingly shut out from home ownership these days?
Look, I think one of the biggest things, and I hear from the friends that are developers, people are looking to work in areas. I think sometimes the cities have to work along with some of the developers in order to accelerate or work together to create more communities. I think when they're two different things. So if we're talking about families and moving into this community, the western suburbs here, where you have fantastic schools, which is typically one of the bigger areas where buyers are looking into investing for their home, as they have the ability to send their kids to a good public school, right? I think there's a lot of opportunity to do that. And I think it would be helpful for the cities to really work along the developers and pick and say, let's be aggressive and look at this plan. Let's be aggressive. I feel like there's a lot of the collaboration there sometimes may not be there. And also, I think the cities are overwhelmed with all this development. So I think it slows down the process even more. So I think it's become very challenging on that end. We definitely have an issue. And I think when I look at it from more than, for example, a millennial that's looking to all of a sudden, buy a home, because everybody likes to own. They like the pride of ownership. So people want to own homes. And I think our number one buyer coming up is going to be the millennial generation, right? I think we're also going to start seeing where homes are going to be smaller, meaning, smaller square footage by efficient, right? So your condo, they may be in Broward County, let's say here in downtown Fort Lauderdale. Typically, we would have said in the past, you got to have a 2-bedroom that's at least 1,200 square feet. All of a sudden, maybe we're going to be in today's prices for a developer. You cannot build that unless you're able to, in downtown Fort Lauderdale, unless you're able to sell it for, $900 plus $1,000 a foot, right? But what happens if you're all of a sudden are in the $1.2 million range? But what happens if you're able to create an efficient floor plan for 800 square foot 2-bedroom that has everything and offers, bike storage and all the things that otherwise you would have to keep in your unit, but, accommodating residents in order to be able to say it's more palpable now. All of a sudden you have a $750,000 price point where it's more manageable for someone that's incoming, right? A young couple that may have their kid or young professionals or partners or whatnot that they're able to find. So I think we have to look into also, how people are going to want to live. I think the pandemic has also shown that they don't want to spend 2 hours of their time driving, right? You don't want to commute for an hour and an hour back. So, all of that takes into consideration. So are you willing to maybe for $750,000 buy a 2-bedroom condo, let's say, instead of, buying it all the way out west, but then you have to commute. So all of those things, I think, that are going to start playing a big role in the future of development, especially if you're able to have the walkability factor where you don't have to spend so much time in the car, right?
I know some of that has led to some developers embracing building home sharing and Airbnb type condo projects, which sell for much less. Is that something that you think is going to take off, or? Yeah,
well, we've sold so much product of this type in the past couple of years. We started with the hotel, and that was the first one. And then we did Legacy, then we did 501, then we did Crosby. I mean, we're talking right there about 1,500 units that we've sold with this model. And the reason why that is again, is your international or your domestic, meaning U.S. investor, or I want to be careful with that because it's not the investor we probably would have known back in 2008. Is the investor who says, I want to park my money and I know that I can rent it. So I have the flexibility of renting it and having the asset pay for itself. But most importantly, I'm not going to lose the value of my currency. If I keep it in Brazil or if I keep it in Argentina or Colombia or whatever, all of a sudden inflation is going to, I'm going to have a problem. So I know I'd much better have it in an asset where it's going to be in the US and at least it's going to pay for itself. And if it generates income, fantastic, right? Then you have your US buyer that says, I always want to have a place in Miami because all of a sudden I'm doing more business there and I'm flying there more, but I don't want to just keep it for myself. I want to make some income and share. So it works when they use it, and if they don't, they have the flexibility of renting it out. And that model of, if you look at Airbnb, right? And if you look at their report and what they're reporting and the earnings and how much the company has grown based on just, renting someone's home, people want to participate on that. I think that the sharing economy concept and it's something that I think is here to stay. I think the mentality of let's have an asset and let's split it among 4 people, or let me buy this and, be able to share it with the world and rent it if I don't need to. I think it's here for a while. I think it is something that especially the millennials are very much in tune to it, having grown with Uber, right? Which is, so why not? Why not a home?
Okay. And because, we have business journals across the state, we have others in Orlando and Tampa and Jacksonville. How do you think our real estate market differs from markets up north?
I feel like South Florida is like you almost have like the perfect storm, right? Because you have what's happening here is that South Florida was always an option for an international buyer for years, right? Ever since the 80s, they started building Brickell Avenue and all the condos in the 70s, and always you had an international component. So that's never new to international buyer, not only Latin America, but also European, right? And then for the US demographic, South Florida was always like a plan B. When I get older, I'll retire there and I'll go there, and right? But now what's happened is not only do you have crises around the world, and therefore they find refuge in the U.S. real estate, and why not? South Florida has all the accessibility to get me back to Europe, get me back to South America and all that. But on top of that, we've now have the new discovery of saying, wait a minute, I can move to South Florida, pay less taxes now. My kids can go to school there, and I can commute back home or back to New York or back to California or back to wherever. My family can make home of South Florida. I'll save taxes. And and look at pricing. It's so much more, it's so much more accessible than where I live currently, like all the other main cities that have been moving to South Florida. And I think that the market here, this is where it compares because they see it as a quality of life. So you have the weather, the access, now that all the companies being attracted here. So it's, all the F&B that's coming in here. So it has grown up very quickly, right? So I think Miami, the last 10 years, let's say pre-COVID, had already done a lot of growing up, having, more of F&B, more culture and businesses looking into it. But after COVID, it basically accelerated that and it propelled us to, we accomplished in probably 2.5 years what we could have taken maybe 10 to do. And that's exciting to see. And I think that's where the difference is. And if you think about it, looking at South Florida, we are still so much more to do. There's still so much. And I think that when companies are coming here and looking at talent, before I have kids and my daughter, for example, is a perfect example. She grew up here in South Florida, went to University of Florida, and then went to San Francisco and has been living and working in San Francisco, for the last 2.5 years after graduating college. Why? Because she didn't find that could, they weren't retaining her here. There was nothing to. Today, I think the conversation is switching. There are kids who are looking into coming. Look at the schools. Look at University of Miami. You can't even, there's so many new people that are coming down. And I think that there's more opportunity here than there was, 5 years ago.
Right.
So I think that's the big difference.
And because we're doing so great on time, I have one more question for you.
Sure.
A lot continues to be written about the Great Resignation and how challenging it's become to retain and hire top talent. How has the real estate industry been impacted?
Yeah, of course. Look, I think, there's different things in the real estate. So there's the general, from the general real estate market, and then there's in my sector, right, in the development sales component. I think from the general real estate market side, firms that are, that their main business is general real estate and having agents and having them grow within and growing their agent base. It's been constant with with COVID, and attracting talent is how much tools can we provide in order to keep them, because they're free agents that can go anywhere they want, right? So I think companies have really had to really step it up there to be able to provide all these tools in order to help them, do the right tour online, present the properties the right way. So that's been a challenge, and to retain them. From my side, which becomes a little bit more, we have employees and it's really, I think we've had to incorporate, I'm doing a 3-day office, 2-day home work for all of our a majority of our admin staff. And then on top of that it's really becoming sensitive to their families. We got to learn so much about our employees during COVID, where we had to do Zoom calls and you met their dog and you met their, their kids or their significant others in different ways. And, you appreciate time so much more. So I think being sensitive to what really, I think the way that we change and the way that I personally want is connecting to the team a lot more, right? Meaning understanding and becoming more vulnerable with them as to what are our challenges, what are our current challenges. I think people want to feel like they belong to an organization, and whatever happens, you're doing it as a team. So, continuing to blend that teamwork approach, I think has been really successful for us in general,
Great. Well, I've enjoyed the conversation as always, and I think you shared some great stuff for our listeners. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mel.
OneWorld Properties CEO Peggy Olin joining us. Thank you for downloading Florida Business Minds, presented by the Florida Business Journals, and brought to you by Tico Peoples Gas, at the heart of Florida's energy.